First of all, I noticed that you extol the virtues of the founding fathers, but I think it's important to keep in mind that they were white slave-owning landowners, and they excluded women from the political process. So this is quite different from a political engagement.
Point well made. Well made.
Okay. Now, I sent you an email back in 22nd of October, and you did answer me on the 13th of November. About the fair packaging and labeling law, and that the amendment has just been stuck. And I urged you to move forward with the amendment that would allow metric-only labeling. And if this amendment were to pass, no producer, packager, or store would be required to take any action or incur any cost. So it's no skin off anybody's nose, you know, if this thing passes. But like this bottle, for example, the package says that it's 1 liter, okay? And if we would pass this amendment to the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act, a manufacturer could just put 1 liter on there, and they wouldn't put how many quarts. They wouldn't be required to by law. But if they wanted to, they could. You know, they'd have an option between dual labeling or metric-only labeling. And by the way, the Metric Act of 1866 is the only thing that makes any measurement legal in this country. You know, what the British imposed upon us, the imperial measurements. I mean, we fought long and hard to get out from under the bloody monarchy, you know. And I don't know why we're still using the measurements that they imposed upon us, the imperial measures, the gallon and so forth. It's insane. And hundreds of children in this country die every year because their parents can't measure the medication. They give them an overdose or an underdose because they mix up milliliters with tablespoons. And we really just need one measurement system in this nation. And I'd urge you to pay attention to Senate Bill 166. It's a legislation that I proposed that would make the international system of units the only legal.
This is a federal bill.
Senate bill. It was LC 44. I introduced it, and now it's SB 166.
Is this in Oregon legislation?
Yes, Oregon. Yeah, and Hawaii is the one who started this with HB 36. Would make the international system the only legal measurement system in Hawaii by 2018. And I just mirrored the same legislation for Oregon, and I hope it moves forward.
Got it. A couple things. First, and that was why I was looking a little bit puzzled. It sounds like this is a bill before the Oregon legislature rather than the United States Congress.
So the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act is a federal thing.
Right. But how are you going at the state level and then the federal law?
Okay, the SB 166 is a separate issue. Just put that aside.
I see.
Put that,
Okay, got it. Okay.
Look into that, but
Got it.
we need to.
We sorted it out. I will take a look at the federal bill. I got that you care about. And Jacob is right there if you want us to be in correspondence with the state legislature. We can do that as well.
And your response really, it just says, well, you know, thank you, but I'm not going to do anything. I don't know why you didn't explain why you wouldn't take any action on this.
So I can tell you there are hundreds of bills, hundreds of amendments, and I will tell you prior to your talking to us, I was not aware of this particular issue. I have to share your view with respect to the implications for parents and being able to read bottles and the like. I frankly have an even deeper concern, one of which is with the literacy rate in our country. We often have parents who can't read and understand the pill bottles and the like, the medications that their youngsters would take. So let us follow it up. We'll try and be back at you, and we'll try and be back at you quickly.
Okay, looking forward to that.
Okay.
The next number is...
And by the way, just on this point with respect, I often hear, you know, people say, well, is the senator going to read my email? Is the senator going to respond directly to my letter? And I want you to know that if I was tied to my desk and was fed intravenously, in other words, I never came home for a county meeting and the like, I could not personally answer every email and snail mail and the like. So what we try to do is answer as quickly as we possibly can. The staff came in the other day rejoicing, saying that they were current on mail, but given the number of committees that I'm on, particularly finance and natural resources and intelligence, we get a lot of mail. We will get back responsibly, quickly. If you have a question, also put in a phone call to one of the offices. It's at our website, and we can see you quickly that way as well. We feel that being accountable is hugely important. So we'll get back to this gentleman again.
So the next number is 691, and then after that, 689.
Maybe people watching football games.
Senator Wyden, since you're on finance and budget, I have a question about our infrastructure. We have severe infrastructure needs, not only with the highway trust fund, but sewer, water infrastructure, or airport infrastructure. What do you see happening to fund this infrastructure that we need? And because we keep kicking the can down the road and we're not making things better and we're losing a lot of jobs.
Thank you for bringing it up. And this is a hugely important issue and gets more important as time goes along. And this kicking the can down the road, basically what happens is Oregon ends up getting a really kicked can. And this just is not a way to do business. You cannot, for example, have big league quality of life and big league economic growth with a little league transportation system. Now, here's where I think things are. Historically, the focus of funding transportation has been the gas tax. That's historically what has been done. Now, that, as I'm sure everybody here knows, has not been very popular because gas tax is a regressive tax. Oregon has been testing a variety of other approaches. Miles driven is one. I think the state people would say it's probably still an experimental kind of mode. I'd like to see us build on something that we know works. And we know it because we've seen it recently. And that is, in the Economic Recovery Act, I was able to get included something called Build America bonds. And our country had never bonded before. And I had gotten Democrats and Republicans lined up for it. On the last night of the Recovery Act debate, I was called on it. I was asked to explain it. I was pretty surprised that anybody would even call me. I certainly wasn't very senior on the committee. And I described it as a tax credit approach, so it helps to bring the private sector into it. And then in talking to various people who handle funds and pensions and the like, I got a good response. And so right before the vote, they said, what do you think will happen? And I said, well, maybe we'll sell $3 to $5 billion worth of these Build America bonds. Everybody goes, oh my goodness, that Ron is just full of ideas, suggestions, $3 to $5 billion. Bang, the apple goes down, pass. How many Build America bonds is sold in a year and a half? Okay, yes? You said zero? $182 billion worth of Build America bonds sold in a year and a half. And here's my point, folks. We have these huge infrastructure, needs. Roads, bridges, falling apart. My colleagues come to the committee and they show cars that seem to have disappeared forever, going into water and the like. We've got all this money, private investment dollars sitting on the sidelines. We've got to link these two. So I'm going to make a special priority this session of Congress focusing on infrastructure, because you look at what our competitors are doing. Was on a national security trip this summer through Asia and going on these high-speed trains. We cannot have the high-skill, high-wage jobs that we want as Oregonians in a global economy with a little league transportation system. So you'll hear me say some more about it. I want to work around something that has proven to work. And those Build America bonds were a big success. They were cheaper, by the way, than the other alternative, and our treasurer, Ted Wheeler, actually put it up on his website describing how it was cheaper than the alternative. We used them in Oregon very extensively, Build America bonds.
Did someone raise their hand for 689? Skip it. 672, and then 674.
So quiet today.
Tell us the joke.
I've never seen so quiet.
Hi, Senator Wyden, and I want to first congratulate you on the recent introduction of the Farm Bill, and particularly its introduction to Oregon as the pilot program.
The Farm to School program?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're very excited about the amendment I got in it where Oregon has been selected one of a handful of states for the model farm to school program. So you're going to hear a lot about this in the Valley because I think this is a way to really create more opportunities for our farmers to sell healthy fruits and vegetables and also for the schools to serve healthier food to kids. So that's great. What about programs important to you?
So I think it's a great, as you said, a great way for farmers to build their market, but can Oregon schools expect to incur greater expense from buying local produce, and if so, how do you expect to offset that expense?
Question was, first of all, this is an option for school districts, and they're not required to do this. I think what we've seen around the country is particularly compared to the alternative, which is to buy from these big warehouses that are hundreds of miles away. You save time and money buying fresh produce, locally. So a school district is not required under this amendment to spend more money purchasing, something locally. This is at their option to try to take advantage, as the number of schools already are, of the fact just from transportation alone kind of standpoint. You look at the costs of refrigeration and transportation, storage, and all these kinds of things, far away, as compared to 15, 20 miles away. I think so there's some obvious advantages, but to ensure that school districts have some flexibility, this is an option for them. When they receive what's essentially entitlement dollars for school lunches for eligible youngsters, they would have an expanded array of choices. That respond to your question?
Thank you.
Someone raise their hand with 674.
Hi, Senator. I don't have a question, but more of a comment for you. I'm a recently retired first sergeant with the Oregon Guard, spent 21 years active duty. My fiance is still serving, Sergeant Major, and he's still...
That's the gentleman right
that's
there?
the gentleman right there. 34 years in the
How
Guard.
about a round of applause for two guards? Did you say you had just come to Oregon?
No, I just recently retired
Oh,
from the
I
Guard.
see.
So, yeah. I was the program manager for the Joint Transition Assistance Program, also known as the JTAP at the time. You know what happened with that program. All I wanted to do today was come and personally thank you for your support that you have given the Guard with that particular program. Myself and Sergeant Major also works with soldiers. Oregon, as you probably know, is number 2 in suicide rate among veterans. And a lot of it leads to because of jobs, which leads them to depression, which they already have PTSD. I'm sorry. And so we see what happens when soldiers don't have the support and get employment that they need. So I just personally wanted to thank you. I know that the internal investigation is still going on with that program. So I just wanted to ask you for your continued support in the years to come. I'm not sure what's going to happen with that, if it's just going to go by the wayside completely or what. But
On my watch, it isn't going to go by the wayside completely, because what you're talking about is so important for our soldiers, and I think I secured the funds for the program, and then to wake up and be told by Guards people like yourself that we didn't, in effect, apply, we didn't take the steps to secure the funds was pretty eye-opening. There was a lot of frustration with Guards people, and certainly when the Oregon Congressional Delegation heard about it, we can't let this happen again. And the reason that this is so important, and our very articulate leader for the Guard has summed it up, is the people who are in the Guard now they have in many instances done 2, 3, 4 tours of duty. These are not the classic citizen soldier who goes, once. They've been under enormous stress, enormous pressure. The point of this program is to ease their transition, particularly in terms of the economy. So, number one, we're going to follow up. Number two, I'm going to use every opportunity I have to make the case for hiring Guards members, particularly now as the economy is picking up. For example, we'll have the annual business summit Tuesday in Portland, and I just reviewed my talk for what I'm going to say. The last line of the talk is going to be, and I use this before big groups of Oregon employers, the single thing I want to ask from you as you walk out of the door today is look at hiring a member of the Guard who's come back. Because we'll have all the big employers from around the state, there, and that'll be an opportunity to put it front and center as an area that ought to be a priority for our state. We don't have the big military bases that they have, back east. In fact, we have sort of virtual services to a great extent online and trying to communicate with Guards members, and it's so important that they and their families understand how much we appreciate their service, how much we value them. Our state legislature has been more active in terms of trying to provide educational benefits. Recently, we lost a loved one and the like. So we've got a lot to do, but with passionate and eloquent representatives like yourself, we can get a lot of these changes made in this high time.
So our next two numbers, 740, 710.
Good afternoon. I'm not the most knowledgeable or eloquent speaker on these issues, but I'm so glad that I have the opportunity to break the ice, and hopefully subsequent questions will help elaborate. But there are two things that are happening in the realm of international commerce, if you will. The Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement and the so-called fast track that's being negotiated. And I think there are a number of issues, questions, and concerns, even among those of us who aren't knowledgeable in depth, have. And I was wondering if maybe you could start off this discussion by explaining two things. One is where you see those two processes right now, and then secondly, where you see your role and your opinion playing a part in those.
Two very good questions. Thank you all for coming, and obviously people feel very strongly about this, and let's spend some time. In fact, what I'd like to do, Nancy, with you and Walt, with your permission, I'm going to respond to this very thoughtful question, and let's have some others talk about PPP as well now, because I know there's so many people who come talk about it. I see the signs around the world. Here's where the debate is. First of all, with respect to TPP, this is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's under discussion. It's a trade agreement between our country and a variety of countries in Asia. It is not done. It is not finished. It is being negotiated by the executive branch. And a lot of people come up in the Dairy Queen or something and say, Ron, what do you think of the TPP? And the first thing I have to say is a little bit like the Star Wars movie that's supposed to come out in the summer. It hadn't come out, so I gotta see what it is in order to have an opinion. So we can talk a little bit more about the TPP, because I know there are a lot of important issues that people want addressed in the TPP. We can go into that, but that is not the first big trade issue that's going to come up. That's number one. Number two, you asked about my role, is I'm the senior Democrat. I guess for another 2 days, I'm chairman of the Finance Committee. Senator Hatch will become the chairman of the Finance Committee, I believe Tuesday at noon or something like that. And I will become the ranking Democrat on the Finance Committee, which is the committee that deals with trade legislation. So I will, in effect, have this come right at Oregon and right at us as we get into the session. In effect, Senator Hatch and I he'll be chairman, I'll have seen him. So the first trade issue that will come up, and I suspect this will come up in the first couple of months of this year, is something called Trade Promotion Authority, Fast Track. There's a variety of different names for it, but it basically lays out the rules for considering a trade bill. In other words, TPP, when it's finished, is an actual bill with various provisions about tariff reductions or questions about the environment or labor or something. That's the actual agreement. The TPA, or Trade Promotion or Fast Track, is the procedures, the ground rules for dealing with it. Where the debate is now, before I became chairman, my predecessor was a gentleman named Max Baucus from Montana. He has now become ambassador to China. Chairman Baucus, along with the current, for 2 more days, because Paul Ryan took over for him, Dave Camp, they introduced their own TPA, their own fast track bill. So it's called the Baucus-Camp bill. I think Senator Hatch was on it as well. I was asked when I became chairman what I thought of that proposal, and I said, I don't think it reflects what's needed in terms of modern trade policy. It wasn't acceptable to me because I didn't think it kept up with the times. And that's a big part of what's coloring my thinking here. Back in the 1990s, which is sort of our first kind of major reference point for big trade agreements with NAFTA and Bill Clinton and the like, we didn't even have iPhones or text messaging and the like. I mean, there's really a time warp in terms of kind of trade policy. Trade policy is not kept up with the times in terms of enforcing the laws that are on the books. It hasn't kept up in terms of transparency or governance issues relating to human rights, labor and environment questions. Back in the 1990s, currency was not the issue of such importance as it is today. So I think we've got to come up with a modern trade policy that reflects the needs of America in 2014. And so if I could describe my views on trade in a sentence, it would go in 2 sentences. Number one, what I'm trying to promote is a trade policy where we can grow things here, make things here, add value to them here, and then ship them somewhere. Okay? That's kind of my view with respect to trade. And second, federal policy has to be trade done right. And if trade is done right, I underline those 3 words, trade done right. This is a really big opportunity for our state. Because in our state, almost 1 out of 5 jobs in Oregon depends on international trade. The trade jobs often pay better than do the non-trade jobs because they reflect a higher level of productivity. And this is hugely important right now if we're seeing wage stagnation for so many working class, families. Trade done right is an opportunity for us to have the export-related jobs that will pay good wages. And finally, it has special implications in the Willamette Valley, because the Willamette Valley is really the center of Oregon's agricultural bounty. All the fruits and vegetables